The room was large, filled with strange beings from across the galaxy. Each one looked more unusual than the last. Some had glowing eyes, others shimmered like liquid metal, and a few floated above the ground without legs. In the center of it all stood Jack Monroe and Claire Dawson, two humans representing Earth at their first intergalactic summit. They were surrounded by towering aliens who spoke in deep, rumbling voices or high-pitched chirps that needed translation devices to understand. Despite feeling out of place, Jack kept his chin up, trying to project confidence. The meeting took place on Zorath 9, a planet known for its shimmering purple skies and massive crystal towers. It was chosen as neutral ground for the Galactic Council's annual gathering, where representatives from dozens of species came together to discuss trade, alliances, and disputes. Humanity had worked hard to earn an invitation. For decades, they'd sent signals into space, launched probes, and built ships capable of traveling beyond their solar system. Now, finally, they were being taken seriously, or so they thought. Jack adjusted his uniform nervously as he glanced around the circular chamber. The walls glowed faintly, casting an eerie light over everyone present. At the far end of the room sat the Fornaxians, a reptilian race notorious for their arrogance. Their leader, Ambassador Xylar, lounged casually in his seat, his scaly green skin reflecting the dim illumination. His slit-like eyes scanned the room lazily, but when they landed on Jack and Claire, a smirk spread across his face. "Ah, the humans," Xylar said loudly, his voice dripping with mockery. "I see you've managed to crawl your way here after centuries of staring at the stars. Tell me, how does it feel to be so primitive?" A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Jack clenched his fists under the table, forcing himself not to react. Beside him, Claire stiffened, her lips pressed tightly together. She shot Jack a warning glance, silently urging him to stay calm. He nodded slightly, swallowing his anger. This wasn't the time for a confrontation. Xylar leaned forward, resting his clawed hands on the table. "Let's be honest," he continued, his tone casual but cutting. "Your kind has barely mastered faster than light travel. You still rely on outdated weaponry and clumsy tactics. What could you possibly contribute to this council?" Entertainment. More laughter echoed through the chamber. Some of the other delegates joined in, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Jack felt heat rising to his cheeks, but he reminded himself why they were here. Humanity wasn't just fighting for respect, they were fighting for survival. If they couldn't prove themselves worthy, they risked being isolated in a hostile universe. As the laughter died down, Jack cleared his throat and spoke in a steady voice. "Ambassador Xylar," he began, making sure to address the Fornaxian directly. "Humanity may be young compared to some of the great civilizations here, but we've come further in a shorter time than most would expect. We adapt, we innovate, and we don't give up easily." His words earned a few murmurs of approval from nearby delegates, though Xylar only sneered. "Adaptation is meaningless if you lack power," the Fornaxian replied coldly. "You're like children playing with sticks while the rest of us wield swords." Claire placed a hand on Jack's arm, sensing his growing frustration. "We'll show you what we're capable of soon enough," she said evenly, her voice calm but firm. "Perhaps sooner than you think." For a moment, Xylar's expression flickered with curiosity before returning to its usual smugness. "Promises mean nothing unless backed by action," he retorted. "Until then, I suggest you sit quietly and learn from your betters." With that, the discussion moved on to other topics, leaving Jack and Claire simmering with quiet determination. As the meeting adjourned hours later, Jack turned to Claire and muttered under his breath, "They have no idea what's coming." Claire smiled faintly. "Good. Let's keep it that way. For now." Walking back to their quarters, Jack couldn't shake the memory of Xylar's condescending grin. But instead of dwelling on the insult, he focused on the plan brewing in his mind. The aliens might laugh today, but humanity wouldn't stay the punchline for long. Back aboard the U.S. Odyssey, Jack paced the narrow confines of the briefing room, his mind racing with ideas. The weight of Zyler's words still lingered, but instead of anger, he felt a spark of resolve. He glanced at Claire, who sat quietly across the table, her fingers drumming against its smooth surface. She looked deep in thought, her brow furrowed slightly. "We can't let them keep thinking we're weak," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. "There's something they don't know about us, something that could change everything." Claire raised an eyebrow. "You mean Phantom Blade?" she asked cautiously. "Jack, that project's been nothing but trouble so far. Every test has ended in failure or glitches. How do you expect it to work now?" Jack stopped pacing and leaned on the table, his expression serious. "Because this time, it has to," he replied firmly. "We've poured years into developing quantum cloaking technology. If we can pull this off, we'll show those aliens exactly what humanity is capable of." Before Claire could respond, the door slid open and Lucas Bennett entered. A wiry man in his early 30s, Lucas was the lead engineer behind the Phantom Blade project. His dark hair stuck out in messy tufts, and his clothes were stained with grease from hours spent tinkering with machinery. Despite his disheveled appearance, his eyes gleamed with intelligence. "You called for me?" Lucas asked, pulling up a chair. "What's going on?" Jack wasted no time. "We need to deploy the stealth ship," he said bluntly. "The Vornaxians think we're powerless. It's time to prove them wrong." Lucas frowned, clearly skeptical. "Deploy it where? And how? We haven't even finished testing the damn thing yet. One wrong move, and we'll blow ourselves up. Or worse, get caught." "That's why we're going to send it somewhere safe first," Jack explained. "Somewhere close enough to gather intel, but far enough to avoid detection if things go south. Near the edge of Vornaxian territory." Claire crossed her arms. "Even if we manage to sneak it past their defenses, what's the point? Are we just spying on them?" "No," Jack said sharply. "We're proving the concept. If the stealth ship works, we'll have leverage. Imagine dropping it right under their noses without them knowing. That alone would shake their confidence." Lucas rubbed his temples, clearly torn between excitement and doubt. "Okay, fine," he muttered after a moment. "But I'm telling you, this is risky. The cloaking system overheats after 20 minutes of continuous use. Any longer, and we risk exposure." "We'll make it work," Jack insisted. "It doesn't need to last forever, just long enough to get in and out." To demonstrate, Lucas pulled out a small tablet and began scrolling through schematics of the prototype ship, codenamed Shadowhawk. Its sleek design looked almost insect-like, with sharp angles and matte black panels designed to absorb light. On the screen, animation showed how the quantum cloaking field would bend electromagnetic waves around the vessel, rendering it invisible to radar and visual scans alike. "This isn't just some ordinary piece of tech," Lucas said proudly, despite his earlier reservations. "If it works, it'll be the most advanced stealth system in the galaxy. But remember, it's experimental. One mistake, and we're toast." Claire leaned forward, studying the plans intently. "How soon can we launch it?" she asked. "As soon as tomorrow," Lucas replied. "But I'll need help prepping it, and someone reliable to pilot it." "I'll do it," came a voice from the doorway. Rachel Myers stood there, her arms crossed and her stance confident. A seasoned pilot known for her quick reflexes and fearless attitude, Rachel had volunteered for countless dangerous missions before. Her short blonde hair framed a face marked by determination. "You sure about this?" Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. Rachel nodded. "Absolutely. If anyone can fly that thing without getting caught, it's me." For the first time since leaving the summit, Jack allowed himself a small smile. With Rachel at the helm and Lucas overseeing the tech, maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. Humanity wasn't ready to back down. Not yet. The next morning, the crew of the U.S. Odyssey gathered in the hangar bay, their eyes fixed on the sleek black shape of the Shadowhawk. The prototype stealth ship sat silently on its launch pad, gleaming faintly under the artificial lights. Its angular design made it look more like a predator than a machine, ready to strike without warning. Around it, engineers scurried about, performing last-minute checks, while Lucas Bennett barked orders into his headset. Rachel Myers stood nearby, dressed in her flight suit and helmet tucked under one arm. She glanced at the ship with a mix of excitement and nervousness. "You really think this thing can stay invisible?" she asked Lucas as he approached. Lucas shrugged, adjusting his glasses. "On paper, yes. In practice? Well, that's what we're about to find out." Jack Monroe entered the hangar, followed closely by Claire Dawson. Both wore serious expressions, though Jack managed a small smile when he saw Rachel. "Ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Rachel replied, her tone steady despite the weight of the mission ahead. "Good," Jack said. "Remember, this isn't just about testing the ship. It's about proving what humanity is capable of. Stay sharp out there." With a final round of instructions, Rachel climbed into the cockpit of the Shadowhawk. The hatch sealed shut behind her, and the engines hummed to life. Moments later, the ship lifted off the ground, its cloaking device activating with a soft shimmer. Within seconds, it vanished from sight, leaving only empty space where it had been moments before. From the bridge of the Odyssey, Jack, Claire, and Lucas watched the mission unfold on a large monitor. The screen displayed a map of the Vornaxian border, marked with blinking dots representing enemy patrols. So far, the Shadowhawk was undetected, gliding silently through the void. Inside the cockpit, Rachel focused intently on her instruments. Flying blind wasn't easy, even with advanced sensors guiding her. But she trusted the technology. The ship responded smoothly to her commands, weaving effortlessly between asteroids and debris fields scattered along the edge of Vornaxian territory. After 20 tense minutes, Rachel reached her target, a cluster of surveillance satellites orbiting the outer rim of the Vornaxian system. These satellites acted as the first line of defense, scanning for intruders. If the Shadowhawk could slip past them unnoticed, it would prove the cloaking device worked. Approaching the satellite grid, Rachel reported over the comms. "Activating full stealth mode now." Back on the Odyssey, Lucas leaned closer to the monitor, his hands gripping the edge of the console. Come on," he muttered under his breath. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, a green light flashed on the screen. "She did it," Lucas exclaimed. The satellites didn't pick her up. Claire let out a sigh of relief, while Jack nodded approvingly. "Great work, Rachel," he said into the comm. "Now proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2 involved gathering intel on nearby Vornaxian outposts. Using the ship's scanners, Rachel began mapping key locations, including supply depots and communication hubs. The data streamed back to the Odyssey in real time, giving the humans valuable insight into their enemies' operations. But just as Rachel prepared to leave the area, something unexpected happened. A faint blip appeared on her radar, a Vornaxian patrol ship heading straight for her position. Though still invisible, the Shadowhawk's quantum cloak generated residual heat signatures that could sometimes be detected by advanced sensors. Guys, we might have a problem," Rachel said, her voice calm but urgent. "I've got company incoming." On the Odyssey, tension spiked. "Can you evade them?" Jack asked quickly. "I'll try," Rachel replied. With swift maneuvers, she guided the Shadowhawk into a nearby asteroid field, using the rocky terrain as cover. The patrol ship passed overhead, its searchlights sweeping the darkness, but it found nothing. Minutes later, Rachel emerged safely on the other side. "Still undetected," she reported. "Heading home now." As the Shadowhawk disappeared into the void once again, Jack turned to Claire and Lucas. "That was close," he admitted, "but it proves one thing. We're not as helpless as they think." Claire smiled faintly. "Let's hope they never see it coming." Back on Earth, news of humanity's invitation to the Galactic Council spread quickly. People celebrated the milestone, hailing it as proof that humanity had finally earned its place among the stars. but not everyone shared the same enthusiasm. Eric Hayes, a junior diplomat assigned to assist with interstellar relations, felt overwhelmed by the pressure. Unlike Jack Monroe and Claire Dawson, who exuded confidence, Eric was more cautious, sometimes to a fault. Eric's task seemed simple enough: attend routine negotiations with minor alien factions to strengthen alliances. These meetings were meant to be low stakes compared to the high-profile discussions led by Jack and Claire. However, Eric's nervousness often got the better of him, making him second-guess every word he spoke. This time, his hesitation would lead to disaster. The negotiation took place aboard a neutral station orbiting a gas giant known as Lizera 7. The delegates included members of the Korin, a squid-like species with bioluminescent skin that shifted colors based on their emotions. Their leader, Ambassador Zinra, had agreed to discuss trade routes with Earth in exchange for advanced medical technology. It was a straightforward deal, or so it seemed. As Eric sat across from Zinra, he struggled to keep up with the translator device clipped to his ear. The Korin language was complex, filled with subtle nuances that didn't always translate well into English. When Zinra mentioned a clause about limiting human activity near Korin territories, Eric misunderstood and nodded too eagerly. "You agree, then?" Zinra asked, her skin glowing a curious shade of blue. Caught off guard, Eric stammered, yes. I mean, if it benefits both sides." Zinra's skin shifted to a darker hue, a sign of irritation. "This is not what we discussed," she said sharply. "Your eagerness suggests disrespect for our boundaries." Before Eric could clarify, another voice cut through the room. Typical human behavior," sneered Sylar, the Vornaxian ambassador. He had arrived uninvited, clearly seeking an opportunity to mock humanity further. They nod and smile without understanding a thing. How charming. The tension in the room grew palpable. Zinra turned to Sylar, her glowing skin flickering between shades of red and purple. "Ambassador Sylar, your presence here is unwelcome," she snapped. "This matter does not concern you." Sylar smirked, ignoring her warning. "Oh, but it does. Humanity's incompetence affects us all. Perhaps it's time they learned their limits before causing more harm." Eric felt his face flush with embarrassment. He wanted to defend himself but couldn't find the right words. Instead, he glanced at the other human representative in the room, a young woman named Karen Liu, who looked just as flustered as he did. Karen tried to step in. "Ambassador Zinra, there's been a misunderstanding," she began diplomatically. "We value your partnership and will ensure this issue is resolved promptly." But Sylar wasn't done. "Resolved? Humans don't resolve anything. They stumble blindly until someone else cleans up their mess." His tone dripped with mockery, drawing quiet chuckles from some of the nearby delegates. By now, word of the incident had reached Jack and Claire aboard the U.S. Odyssey. They listened to reports of Eric's blunder with growing concern. While they understood that mistakes happened, Sylar's interference threatened to escalate the situation into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. "This is bad," Claire muttered, pacing the bridge. "If Sylar pushes this further, the Korin might withdraw their support entirely." Jack rubbed his temples, thinking hard. "We need to act fast. If we can demonstrate our capabilities discreetly, maybe we can turn this around." Claire stopped pacing and looked at him. "You're thinking about the Shadowhawk, aren't you?" Jack nodded. "Exactly. If we show the galaxy what we're truly capable of, no one, not even Sylar, will dare underestimate us again." Meanwhile, back on Lizera 7, Eric tried to salvage the situation. With Karen's help, he managed to renegotiate the terms of the agreement, though it came at a cost. The Korin demanded stricter restrictions on human activities in their territory, leaving Eric feeling like he'd failed. Later that evening, Eric sat alone in his quarters, replaying the day's events in his mind. He knew he'd made a mistake, but he also realized something else. Humanity couldn't afford to let fear dictate their actions anymore. As much as he dreaded the idea, he agreed with Jack. It was time to prove themselves. Unbeknownst to Eric, plans were already underway. The Shadowhawk wouldn't remain hidden for long. Jack gathered the team in the briefing room of the U.S. Odyssey, his expression serious but determined. The mood was tense, with everyone aware of the stakes. Claire sat beside him, her arms crossed, while Lucas Bennett fidgeted nervously with a tablet displaying schematics of the Shadowhawk. Rachel Meyer leaned against the wall, her flight suit still slightly smudged from the previous mission. Completing the group was Samantha Brooks, the medic who would join the infiltration team. Her calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the room. "We've been pushed around long enough," Jack began, his voice steady. "Stylar thinks we're weak, and after today's mess with Eric, others might start believing it too. We need to send a message, one they won't forget." Claire nodded. "But we have to be smart about this. If we act recklessly, we risk starting a war. This isn't just about pride. It's about proving humanity can handle itself responsibly." Lucas raised a hand hesitantly. "I get that, but what exactly are we planning? Another test run? Or something bigger?" "Something bigger," Jack replied firmly. "We're going to infiltrate the Vornaxian capital city using the Shadowhawk. Once inside, we'll disable their central power grid temporarily. Nothing permanent, just enough to show them we could do real damage if we wanted to." Rachel straightened up, intrigued. "You mean sabotage?" she asked. "No," Jack corrected. "This isn't sabotage, it's a demonstration. Think of it as turning off the lights for a few minutes. Enough to make them realize we're not helpless." Samantha spoke up next, her tone cautious. "What happens if they catch us? Even with the cloaking device, there's always a chance something goes wrong." "That's why we stick to the plan," Jack said. "Minimal contact, minimal risk. We go in, plant the EMP devices Lucas designed, and get out before anyone knows we were there." Lucas tapped on his tablet, pulling up a holographic map of the Vornaxian capital. The city sprawled across the landscape like a metallic spiderweb, its towering structures connected by glowing energy conduits. At its heart lay the central power grid, a massive hub responsible for distributing energy throughout the empire. "This is our target," Lucas explained, pointing to the glowing core on the map. "The EMP will disrupt their systems briefly, causing confusion without lasting damage. After that, we vanish." Claire studied the map carefully. "How long will the blackout last?" 10 minutes, tops," Lucas answered. "Long enough to make an impression, but short enough to avoid suspicion." Rachel tilted her head thoughtfully. "And what about me? Am I flying solo again?" "No," Jack said. "This time, you'll take Lucas and Samantha with you. Lucas will handle the tech side, and Samantha will keep everyone safe if things go sideways. You'll need each other to pull this off." The three exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the trust placed in them. None of them spoke, but the weight of the mission hung heavy in the air. Finally, Jack stood, addressing the group one last time. "Listen, I know this is dangerous, but remember why we're doing this. Humanity has spent centuries looking up at the stars, dreaming of a place among them. Now we're here, and we're not leaving. We're not backing down. Let's show these aliens what we're made of." There was a moment of silence before Rachel broke it with a grin. "Well, if we're going to make history, let's do it right." Lucas managed a nervous laugh, while Samantha gave a small nod of agreement. Claire offered a faint smile, though her eyes betrayed her lingering concerns. Jack, however, felt a surge of confidence. For the first time since the summit, he believed they had a real shot at turning the tide. As the meeting ended and the team dispersed to prepare, Jack lingered behind with Claire. "Do you think we're ready for this?" she asked quietly. "We have to be," Jack replied. "Because if we don't stand up now, no one else will." The Shadowhawk glided silently through the darkness of space, its cloaking device rendering it invisible to even the most advanced sensors. Inside the cockpit, Rachel Meyer focused intently on the controls, her hand steady as she navigated toward the Vornaxian capital. Beside her sat Lucas Bennett, his eyes glued to a tablet displaying live data from the ship's systems. In the back, Samantha Brooks checked their equipment one last time, ensuring everything was ready for the mission ahead. Approaching the outer defense grid, Rachel announced, her voice calm but alert. On the monitor, blinking dots represented Vornaxian patrols and surveillance drones. The team had studied these patterns carefully during the planning phase, and so far, the Shadowhawk remained undetected. Lucas leaned forward, his fingers tapping nervously on the tablet. "Heat signatures are stable," he muttered. "But we need to stay sharp. If anything spikes, they'll notice us." Samantha strapped on her gear, her movements efficient and practiced. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," she said. "We're here to make a statement, not start a fight." As the Shadowhawk entered the planet's atmosphere, the view outside shifted dramatically. The Vornaxian capital city stretched below them, a sprawling expanse of gleaming metal towers and pulsing energy conduits. At its center stood the massive power grid, glowing faintly like a mechanical heart. It was their target, and their only chance to pull this off without being caught. Rachel guided the ship into a narrow canyon, using the terrain to mask any residual heat signatures. The maneuver was risky, but necessary. "Hold tight," she warned as the ship dipped lower, skimming dangerously close to jagged cliffs. "This part gets tricky." Lucas gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white. "Tricky is one way to put it," he mumbled under his breath. Despite his nerves, he kept an eye on the readings, watching for any signs of trouble. Minutes later, they reached the designated landing zone, a secluded area near the base of the power grid. Rachel powered down the engines, and the Shadowhawk settled gently onto the ground. Before stepping out, she turned to the others. "Remember the plan. Quick in, quick out. No heroics." The trio disembarked, moving swiftly across the rocky terrain. Lucas carried a small device resembling a metallic briefcase, which contained the EMP charges designed to disrupt the power grid. Samantha followed closely behind him, scanning their surroundings for potential threats. Rachel brought up the rear, keeping watch with a handheld scanner to ensure they weren't walking into an ambush. Reaching the base of the tower, Lucas knelt down and opened the case. His hands moved quickly as he attached the charges to key points along the structure. "Just a few more seconds," he whispered, sweat beading on his forehead. Suddenly, Samantha froze, holding up a hand. "Did you hear that?" she asked softly. Everyone stopped, listening intently. A faint hum grew louder in the distance. Vornaxian patrol drones sweeping the area. They hadn't been spotted yet, but it was only a matter of time. "We need to hurry," Rachel urged, glancing around anxiously. Lucas worked faster, his fingers trembling slightly as he secured the final charge. "Done," he breathed, closing the case. "Let's move." They retraced their steps, heading back toward the canyon where the Shadowhawk waited. But just as they reached the ship, alarms blared overhead. Red lights flashed across the sky, illuminating the landscape. "They know something's here," Samantha shouted, panic creeping into her voice. Rachel didn't waste a second. She hit the activation button on her wrist console, and the Shadowhawk's engines roared to life. As the hatch opened, the three scrambled inside, barely avoiding the first wave of incoming fire from the drones. "Hang on," Rachel yelled, slamming the throttle forward. The ship shot upward, weaving through the canyon as explosions erupted behind them. For a moment, it seemed impossible to escape, but then the EMP detonated. A brilliant flash of light engulfed the city below, plunging it into darkness. The drones faltered mid-flight, their systems temporarily disabled. Seizing the opportunity, Rachel piloted the Shadowhawk out of the canyon and into open space, leaving the chaos far behind. Back aboard the U.S. Odyssey, Jack and Claire watched the live feed, their faces tense with anticipation. When the screen showed the city go dark, Claire let out a shaky breath. "It worked," she said quietly. Jack nodded, a hint of pride breaking through his stern expression. Now let's see how the Vornaxians react. The Shadowhawk tore through the atmosphere, its engines roaring as Rachel pushed the ship to its limits. Behind them, the Vornaxian capital city remained shrouded in darkness, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. The EMP had done its job, disabling the power grid temporarily, but now the aliens were scrambling to respond. Red lights flashed across the sky, and the hum of approaching drones grew louder with each passing second. "They're onto us," Lucas shouted from his seat, gripping the edge of his console as the ship jolted violently. "How much longer until we're clear?" Rachel didn't answer immediately, her focus entirely on navigating the narrow canyon they had used to enter. The rocky walls loomed close on either side, forcing her to make split-second decisions to avoid collisions. "Just hold tight," she snapped, her voice sharp but controlled. "We're almost there." Samantha clung to her seat in the back, her eyes wide as explosions erupted around them. Bits of debris rained down from above, evidence of the Vornaxians' desperate attempt to stop them. "They're firing blind," she said, trying to sound calm despite the chaos. "But if they keep this up, we're not going to make it out unscathed." Lucas glanced at the monitor, which showed multiple blips converging on their position. 3 ships incoming. No 4. They're boxing us in. Rachel gritted her teeth, her hands moving deftly over the controls. She knew they couldn't outrun the enemy forever, especially with the cloaking device struggling under the strain of prolonged use. Heat signatures were beginning to leak, making them more visible by the second. A loud beep from the dashboard confirmed her worst fear. The cloaking field was destabilizing. "We're losing stealth," she warned, her voice tight. "Brace yourselves." As if on cue, a bright beam of energy shot past the cockpit, narrowly missing the ship. The Vornaxians had locked onto their position. More blasts followed, shaking the Shadowhawk violently. Alarms blared inside the cabin, warning of critical damage to the hull. "Shields are down to 40%. Lucas yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "If we take another hit like that, we're done." Rachel didn't hesitate. She yanked the controls hard to the left, sending the ship into a steep dive. The move caught the pursuing fighters off guard, giving her precious seconds to regroup. "I need options, people," she barked. "Any ideas?" Samantha leaned forward, her mind racing. "There's a storm system ahead, dense clouds and lightning. If we can lose them in there, we might stand a chance." Rachel nodded sharply. "Good enough for me." With a flick of her wrist, she adjusted course, aiming straight for the swirling mass of gray clouds on the horizon. The Vornaxian ships followed relentlessly, their weapons firing nonstop. Another blast struck the rear of the Shadowhawk, causing sparks to fly inside the cabin. 30%. Lucas shouted, his knuckles white as he gripped the armrests. "We're running out of time." The storm swallowed them whole moments later, plunging the ship into near-total darkness. Lightning illuminated the cockpit sporadically, casting eerie shadows across everyone's faces. Outside, the Vornaxian ships hesitated, their sensors confused by the interference caused by the electrical activity. "This is our chance," Rachel said, her voice firm despite the chaos. "Stick close to the ground and keep low. We'll slip out the other side before they realize what happened." The team held their breath as the Shadowhawk hugged the terrain, weaving between jagged peaks and valleys hidden within the storm. The pursuing ships fell behind, unable to match the prototype's agility or adapt to the unpredictable environment. Slowly but surely, the blips on the monitor began to fade. When they finally emerged from the storm, the coast was clear. The Vornaxian ships were nowhere to be seen, their pursuit abandoned in frustration. Rachel let out a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly as she stabilized the ship. "We did it," she whispered, almost to herself. Lucas slumped back in his seat, relief washing over him. That was way too close. Samantha exhaled deeply, running a hand through her hair. "Let's not do that again anytime soon." Back aboard the U.S. Odyssey, Jack and Claire watched the telemetry data stream in. their expressions tense until confirmation came through. The Shadowhawk was safe. Jack allowed himself a small smile. "They made it," he said quietly. Claire nodded, though her brow remained furrowed. "For now. But this isn't over. The Vornaxians will want answers, and when they find them, things are going to get messy." Jack stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. "Then we'd better be ready." The Shadowhawk limped through space, its damaged hull groaning under the strain of re-entry into safer territory. Rachel guided the ship with steady hands, though her knuckles were white from gripping the controls too tightly. Behind her, Lucas and Samantha worked quickly to assess the damage, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of diagnostic screens. "We've got breaches in 2 sections," Lucas reported, his voice strained. "But the life support systems are holding. For now." Samantha nodded, her tone calm but urgent. "We need to patch those up before we dock with the Odyssey. If they worsen, we could lose pressure." Rachel didn't respond immediately. Her focus was on keeping the ship stable as it approached the larger vessel waiting ahead. The U.S. Odyssey loomed in the distance, its sleek frame a welcome sight after the chaos they'd endured. As they drew closer, Jack's voice crackled over the comms. "Status report," he said, his tone clipped but concerned. "We're banged up, but alive," Rachel replied, allowing herself a small smile. "EMP worked like a charm. City went dark for 10 minutes. But the Vornaxians figured out something was wrong and chased us into a storm. Took some hits, but we lost them." There was a pause on the other end before Jack spoke again. "Good work. Get aboard and prep for debriefing. We don't have much time." As the Shadowhawk docked and the hatch opened, the team stepped onto the Odyssey, greeted by the grim expressions of Jack and Claire. Despite their relief at seeing everyone safe, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on all of them. The Vornaxians weren't known for letting insults or attacks go unanswered. Jack led the group to the briefing room, where holographic displays showed live updates from the Vornaxian capital. The city had regained power, but confusion still lingered among its inhabitants. Reports indicated heightened military activity near Earth's borders, suggesting retaliation might already be underway. "We pulled off the impossible," Jack began, pacing slowly. "But they're not going to ignore this. Xylar will demand answers, and when he finds out it was us, he'll declare war," Claire finished, her voice low. "Which means we need to act fast. If we reveal the Shadowhawk publicly, we might just buy ourselves enough leverage to avoid conflict." Lucas frowned, scratching his head nervously. "You mean decloak? Show ourselves?" "Exactly," Jack said firmly. "If we can demonstrate that we have technology even they don't understand, it might give them pause. Fear is a powerful motivator." Rachel crossed her arms, considering the idea. "It's risky. Once we expose the Shadowhawk, there's no turning back. They'll know exactly what we're capable of. But so will everyone else," Claire added. "Other species will see that humanity isn't helpless. That changes everything." The room fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over them. Finally, Samantha broke the quiet. "What's the alternative? Wait for the Vornaxians to come knocking on our doorstep?" Jack shook his head. "No. We strike first, not with weapons, but with proof. Let them see what we're made of." With the plan set, preparations began immediately. Engineers swarmed around the Shadowhawk, reinforcing its systems and ensuring it was ready for one final mission. This time, stealth wouldn't be an option. They'd deliberately position themselves within range of Vornaxian sensors, then to cloak in full view of their forces. Hours later, the moment arrived. The Shadowhawk drifted silently toward a cluster of Vornaxian warships patrolling near Earth's borders. Tension aboard both vessels was palpable as the countdown began. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Jack watched the monitors closely, his heart pounding. "Decloaking in 3, 2, 1. Rachel's voice came through the comms, steady despite the stakes. Suddenly, The Shadowhawk shimmered into existence, its sleek black form appearing like a ghost materializing from thin air. Alarms blared across the Vornaxian fleet as their systems detected the intruder. For several long seconds, there was only stunned silence. Then, Ambassador Xylar's furious voice erupted over the open channel. "What is the meaning of this?" Jack stepped forward, addressing the Vornaxian leader directly. "This is humanity's answer to your mockery. You underestimated us once. Don't make that mistake again." On the screen, Xylar's scaly face twisted with shock, and perhaps for the first time, fear. The silence that followed Jack's words was deafening. On the main screen of the U.S. Odyssey, Ambassador Xylar stared back at them, his slit-like eyes wide with disbelief. The Vornaxian leader had always viewed humanity as weak and insignificant, a species barely worth noticing. But now, staring at the sleek form of the Shadowhawk floating defiantly in front of their fleet, he couldn't hide his shock. This is impossible," Xylar stammered, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "How could you? How could we what?" Jack interrupted, his tone firm but controlled. "Develop technology beyond your understanding. Outsmart you when you thought we were helpless. Maybe it's time you stopped assuming you know everything about us." Xylar's expression shifted from surprise to anger, his clawed hands gripping the edges of his console tightly. "You dare challenge us? Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I know exactly what I've done," Jack replied calmly. "I've shown you that humanity isn't something to mock or dismiss. We're here, and we're not going anywhere." Claire stepped forward, standing beside Jack. Her voice carried a quiet authority as she addressed the Vornaxians. "We didn't come here looking for a fight. All we wanted was respect, for Earth to take its rightful place among the stars. But every time we tried to prove ourselves, you laughed at us. Now, you'll listen." For a moment, no one spoke. The tension between the two sides crackled like electricity in the air. Then, slowly, Xylar leaned back in his seat, his features hardening into an unreadable mask. He exchanged glances with his advisors, who whispered urgently in hushed tones. Finally, he turned back to face the humans. "You think revealing this toy will change anything?" Xylar asked, though there was less mockery in his voice now and more calculation. "You may have surprised us today, but surprises don't win wars." "We're not declaring war," Jack said firmly. "We're proving a point. If you push us, we'll push back harder. Humanity doesn't start fights, but we sure as hell finish them." Xylar's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the image of the Shadowhawk on his screen, clearly weighing his options. Whatever arrogance he'd displayed before was gone, replaced by a cautious uncertainty. For the first time, humanity wasn't just a minor annoyance. It was a potential threat. Back aboard the Odyssey, the crew watched anxiously as the standoff continued. Lucas fidgeted nervously with his tablet, while Rachel stood near the helm, ready to act if things escalated. Claire glanced at Jack, her expression tense but hopeful. They had gambled everything on this moment, and now they waited to see if it would pay off. Finally, Xylar broke the silence. "Very well," he said, his voice low and grudging. "Perhaps we underestimated you, but let me make one thing clear. This changes nothing permanently. You've earned our attention, but respect must be maintained through actions, not threats." Jack nodded, keeping his tone measured. "Fair enough. Let's start fresh, with mutual respect instead of insults." As the transmission ended, the room erupted into murmurs of relief and disbelief. The Vornaxians hadn't surrendered, but they also hadn't attacked. That alone was a victory. Claire exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "That went better than I expected." "Don't celebrate yet," Jack warned, though a faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "They won't forget this, but at least they'll think twice before underestimating us again." News of the encounter spread quickly across the galaxy. Within hours, reports reached the Galactic Council, sparking debates among delegates from countless species. Some expressed admiration for humanity's ingenuity, while others voiced concern about escalating tensions with the Vornaxians. Regardless of opinions, one fact remained undeniable. Humanity had proven itself capable of standing toe-to-toe with even the most advanced civilizations. When Jack and Claire returned to the council chamber days later, they found themselves greeted not with scorn but curiosity, and even a hint of respect. As Jack took his seat, he allowed himself a small sense of pride. Humanity had taken its first real step toward earning its place among the stars. And it was only the beginning. The U.S. Odyssey drifted silently in orbit around Earth, its crew reflecting on the events of the past few days. The tension that had once filled the ship was replaced by a cautious optimism. Jack stood on the observation deck, staring out at the glowing blue orb below. It seemed smaller from up here, fragile even, but it carried the hopes and dreams of billions of people who refused to give up. Claire joined him moments later, her footsteps soft against the metal floor. She leaned against the railing beside him, her gaze following his toward the planet. "Do you think we really changed anything?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with both hope and doubt. Jack didn't answer right away. He thought about Siler's reaction, the stunned faces of the Vornaxians, and the whispers spreading across the galaxy. "I think we showed them we're not afraid to fight for our place," he said finally. "Respect isn't given, it's earned. And today, we took one step closer." Claire nodded slowly, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Still, it feels surreal. A week ago, they were laughing at us. Now, they're watching us like we might be dangerous. And maybe that's a good thing," Jack replied, turning to face her. "Fear can keep enemies at bay, but respect keeps allies close. If other species see what we're capable of, they'll start thinking twice before crossing us, or counting us out." Back in the hangar bay, Lucas Bennett inspected the Shadowhawk, running diagnostics to ensure it was ready for future missions. Despite the risks they'd taken, he couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. The prototype stealth ship had performed beyond anyone's expectations, proving that humanity could innovate when it mattered most. Rachel Myers stood nearby, arms crossed as she watched him work. "You know," Rachel said, breaking the silence, "this little bird might have just saved us all." Lucas chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't jinx it. We're not done yet. There are still plenty of aliens out there who think we're weak." "Maybe," Rachel admitted, "but next time they underestimate us, we'll be ready." On the bridge, communications officers monitored incoming messages from across the galaxy. News of the Shadowhawk's existence and its role in humbling the Vornaxians had spread far and wide. Delegates from several species reached out, expressing interest in forming alliances or sharing technology. Humanity's reputation had shifted overnight, transforming from an afterthought into a rising power worth noticing. As Jack addressed the crew during a brief ceremony, his words carried a mix of gratitude and determination. "What we accomplished wasn't just about showing off our tech," he said, his voice steady. "It was about proving something bigger, that no matter how many times we fall, we always get back up. That's what makes us human." The room erupted into applause, though Jack quickly raised a hand to quiet them. "This isn't the end. It's only the beginning. We've earned a seat at the table, but now we need to prove we deserve to stay there. So let's keep pushing forward, together." In the weeks that followed, humanity solidified its position among the stars. Trade agreements were signed, diplomatic ties strengthened, and new partnerships formed. The Galactic Council began treating Earth as an equal rather than a newcomer, thanks in large part to the courage and ingenuity of Jack, Claire, and their team. As the Odyssey prepared to return home, Jack took one last look at the vast expanse of space stretching endlessly before him. It was daunting, yes, but also full of possibilities. Humanity wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But for the first time in history, they weren't alone. They were part of something greater, standing shoulder to shoulder with civilizations older and wiser than their own. And somewhere deep inside, Jack knew this was just the start of a new era. An era where humanity wouldn't just survive among the stars but thrive.